Welcome back. This is Mr. Hassan's Maths channel, and I'm now answering a question from the IGCSE Cambridge Paper 2, Variant 2 from February-March 2021. It's from the 0580 syllabus, and it's also the 0980 syllabus as well. They're the same paper, just they grade them according to letters for 0580 and according to numbers for 0980, but they give you the same exam. Now, in this question here, we are asked to write each number correct to one significant figure and find an estimate for the value of this calculation, right? So I am making this video in September 2023, and right now has begun the teaching for the new syllabus, which will be first examined in 2025. Okay, I think the first exam for it will probably be in March 2025. Now, that exam is almost like completely different now in terms of its format from what we've had previously for many, many years. Now they're going to introduce a new paper. Okay, they're going to have a paper 2 and a paper 4 for the extended syllabus, as before, but the paper 2 will be weighted exactly as a paper 4 as far as I remember. Okay, and it will be a non-calculator paper. Okay, so the important thing that I'm focused on here, it's going to be a paper that you're not allowed to take a calculator into the exam. So not only, it won't be just like, do not use a calculator for this question, you won't be allowed to take one into the exam for that particular paper. Okay, it's going to be non-calculator paper, just like they have in, I think, Edexcel already. So there's going to be, a lot of students who have to get out of some habits that they have, okay, and have to get rid of a disease that they have called calculatoritis, where they are over dependent on the calculators even for very simple calculations. And a question like this would be one where at a certain stage towards the end, a lot of students would not even think about using their mental maths to calculate it. They will just stick to whatever they get after a certain stage in the calculator to write the answer. And at the moment, until November 2024, that you can get away with that. It's no problem. But once you get to 2025, then there's no escaping having to, use mental maths and having to understand how to do some basic arithmetic operations, which many students have forgotten because of their overuse of the calculator. So in a question like this, we have to write each number correct to one significant figure and then find an estimate for the value of this fraction. Now, what some people might do, okay, or what some people do, which I see, quite often, right, the silly mistake that people make, is they would actually find the value of this using their calculator first, and then they will round the answer to one significant figure. But that's not what the question is asking you to do. It's not asking you to put this in your calculator, find the answer, and round the answer to one significant figure. It's saying by writing each of these 4 numbers correct to one significant figure, and then using that version of that numbers, basically the rounded version of that number, then estimate the value of this calculation. So that's what the question is actually asking you to do. So you must answer the question that is being asked. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to take these numbers like 2.8 and 82.6 and 27.8 and 13.9, and we have to rewrite them as rounded to one significant figure. Okay, now, when you round a number to one significant figure, you need to, of course, identify what is, the first significant figure in a number. So in all of these numbers here, okay, basically, it's the first number that you see. It's always the first non-zero number that you see in a in a number is the first significant figure, the first non-zero number. So if you had a number like, if one of the numbers was 0.0, say 3057, if you had that number, then this would be the first significant figure because it's the first number that's not zero that you see. And then if you have zeros between non-zero numbers, they are also significant. So this would be the second significant figure, this would be the third, and this would be the fourth, so on. But in this case, we don't have these decimals like that starting with 0 point, so we don't have to think about that for this particular question. So the first significant figure here is going to be the 2. So what we have to determine is, okay, or one of the ways to answer this question is to think about what is its place value. Okay, thinking about that will help you also with other topics like limits of accuracy if you think in this way. So the first digit here, the first significant figure, is in the place of the units, right? You have hundreds, tens, units, then you have the decimal point, tenths, hundredths, and so on. This is in the place of the units. Okay, so if you want to round this to the nearest unit or the nearest one, okay, one way you can think about it is, okay, in terms of ones, if you're going up in ones, this number lies somewhere between 2 and 3. And it's somewhere closer to 3 than it is to 2. So we can say this will round to the number 3 to the nearest unit. Okay, that's one way of thinking about it. Another way of thinking about it is you draw a kind of an imaginary line in your mind, okay, after the significant figure you're looking for, and you see what's after it. After it is a number. If the number after it is between 0 and 4, this remains as it is. If it's between 5 and 9, you increase this by 1, which you've done, and then you write that number down. Because it stops at the decimal point, no need to write any 0.00 after it. Just stop there. So that's the number 3. So this will give us, in this question, this will give us, the 2.8 will become a 3, and then you times it by this. Now, 82.6, the first significant figure is this number here, the 8, which is in the place this time of the tens. So this number we want to round it to the nearest 10. Okay, now this number lies, in terms of tens, somewhere between 80 and 90. That's where it lies. Those are the tens that it's between. And of course, 82.6 is closer to 80 than it is to 90. So 82.6 is equal to 80 to the nearest 10. So then this is going to become 80. Now, another way of doing it, as I mentioned, is you can draw this like imaginary kind of line between the 8 and the 2 here after the first significant figure. And then you say, okay, the number after it is between 0 and 4. So this stays the same. So you're going to keep this as an 8. Now, one of the mistakes that people make is they will just write the answer as 8. But there's a gap between this and the decimal point. And that gap keeps this in the place of the tens. So you have to fill it with zeros until the decimal point. And then you don't write the decimal point or anything after it. Because if you didn't write this 0, it changes this from being in the tens to the units. Right? And no one would accept, for example, if somebody said to you, okay, I know you owe me $82.6. But I'm going to round it to one significant figure, and I'm going to give you back $8, right? Because that's what 82.6 is, rounded to one significant figure. And no one would accept that, okay? Because, you know, you're going to be getting just $8 or $8 instead of 82. So, you know, use a bit of common sense. This rounding, when you're writing it to one significant figure, you are basically giving something that's approximately that value. Okay, approximately that value. So 82.6 has to be 80, okay, to the nearest 10. All right, so there's something that you need to realize. And these are very similar. These are also, you know, the first significant figure is in the place of the tens. So you're going to have 27.8 somewhere between 20 and 30. And of course, this time it's closer to 30. So that's going to be 30. Okay. So I'm going to put this over there. So that's going to be 30. And then you got minus. And 13.9, if you think about that one, this is 10 and 20. It's rounded to the nearest 10. So it's somewhere between 10 and 20. Of course, it's closer to 10 than it is to 20. So this is going to become 10 rounded to one significant figure. Now, of course, if you look at this and you look at that, well, this looks way easier to deal with than that does, right? Now, what we can do here is we need to simplify. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this subtraction underneath first, because some people will say, oh, you got to do multiplication before subtraction. Well, this is like a fraction bar which acts like a bracket. So this is separate from that. This is like 3 times 80 in a bracket divided by 30 minus 10. So it's kind of like this is kind of like a bracket here. Okay, this big fraction bar acts like a bracket. So there's no problem with me doing 30 minus 10 first. Okay, in fact, some people say brackets first, whatever, right? But I'm not going to now multiply these two, because what I'm going to do is make my life easy, right? Of course, those students who are doing this exam probably in up to November 2024, I would say maybe 80% of this would just put this in the calculator and get the answer. But as I mentioned, from 2025 and onwards, if you're doing a question like this in the non-calculator paper, then you will be forced to do this calculation, okay, mentally without the aid of a calculator. So you have to know how to deal with it. And one of the things that you want to do is you want to learn how to make life easy for yourself and not difficult when you're doing something like this. So it's always better to break things down to make them simpler before you proceed to, carry out a calculation. So I wouldn't multiply 3 by 80 first, although it's not a big deal. It's quite easy to do. But in general, you get used to making things simpler. It will make more complicated things easy for you if you follow these simple procedures. So what I would do is I would see this is 3 times 80 over 20. There's a common factor of at least 20 in these two terms. Okay, because you have 3 times 2 times 40 over 20. There's a common factor of 20. If you consider 20 goes into itself 1 time and 20 goes into 80 4 times, right? That's something that you should realize. If you have a multiplication here, you can do that. If there's a subtraction like this, I can't, for example, say, let's cancel out like the 3 with this 30, for example, because you have to first combine these together, right? As you have to have a product of factors. Now this is 20 times 1. It's like a product, and this is 3 times 80. So you can cancel out then if they're products on top of each other. So that 20 and that 4 cancel, the 80 cancel out to give you 4, and 3 times 4 is 12, and there's your answer. Okay. Now if you were doing this exam at the time when you can use a calculator, then there's something you could do to make sure that you've got the right answer. All right. Or, at least you're on the right tracks at least. But if you're doing this when the calculator is now no longer allowed, then this is one check that you can't really make in terms of, checking to see if you've got something within the right kind of idea. So 2.8 times 82.6 divided by 27.8 minus 13.9. The actual real value of this is 16 point something. Now, of course, we're not going to get 16 point something. We're going to get something which is, kind of close to it. But, of course, it's not going to be the same because, we've made 2.83. That's become bigger. We've made this number slightly smaller. This has become bigger. This has become smaller. But the denominator has become like, 20. And this denominator is less than 20, right? So this number, the answer for it actually is going to be bigger than this number, as we saw, but it's not completely out. If we'd done something silly like, for example, write this as 8 instead of 80, then the answer will be completely out. Okay, it will be, you'd end up with basically 24 over 20. So it will be like 1 point. It will be completely out. So you can check at the point, or if you're doing this exam when there's a calculator still allowed, you can check to see, is my answer kind of sensible? All right. But if you're doing it at the time when the calculator is not allowed, then you can't make the extra check. So you have to be extra careful in your working. All right. So there's the answer to this question. I went on a little bit about this question. It's only worth 2 marks, but I just want to go through some background, explaining a few things so people can understand exactly what is behind this topic. And also introducing you to the idea that there's going to be a calculator paper, a non-calculator paper. So you have to start getting your mental maths in order, which means knowing your times tables, knowing techniques of how to simplify things like fractions, and all of those things are going to become more and more important as this new non-calculator paper approaches. So you get ready for it from now. Okay, so thank you for watching. Other questions from this paper, when I get to answer them, are going to be found in a playlist that will appear at the top of the page on the top right over here. Other questions from the topic of rounding and estimation, okay, will be found in the playlist that will appear over here. You can subscribe to my channel by clicking on this link, and you can watch the video above here. The link, it will be linked here, which will tell you how to use my channel to find those things that you are looking for in an efficient manner, whether you're doing IGCSE or A-level Edexcel or A-level Cambridge. You can find all my material easily indexed, and the video that's linked over here will explain exactly how you can find that quickly. Thank you for watching and see you soon.